and doesn't eat enough, and then half an hour later, is he required to make another blessing to eat more food? Is there a time period that the first blessing carries through?
So it depends. If you're still part of the meal, you know, you're eating at a long bar mitzvah, and there's a lot of speeches. Okay, if you're at a bar mitzvah and there's a lot of speeches, and it's all one meal, you know, so you eat a little salad now. 45 minutes later, you're taking a sip of, you know, a l'chaim, and then a half hour after that, they finally bring out the main course, and then an hour later is dessert. It's all one meal. It's one blessing. It's one grace after meal afterwards. If you're eating an apple, then and you go to the kitchen, eat an apple, and say goodbye, and go back to your work. So yeah, say the after blessing then, and then when you come back to eat your next snack, you will recite a new bracha on the next snack.
Another blessing.
Different sitting. Each sitting is like a separate meal, so to speak.
Okay. All right. That's exactly what I meant. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, good. Okay, you're welcome. So the Gemara that we've been learning, we mentioned that there's an argument when it comes to the different food items that have different brachas. Do we have this this Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis argue if the 7 species take precedence, or what one cherishes takes precedence? Does that apply if there are different brachas? And one opinion says, yeah, that same argument will apply as well in a case where the brachas are different. And the Gemara asks, well, how will it apply? What would that mean? That the argument of Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis would apply if the brachas are different. And the Gemara explains lahaktim, to know which one to say first. So in the other scenario where you're only reciting one bracha, it's not an issue of which bracha to say first, because you're only saying one bracha. In the other scenario, you only said one bracha. The question was which food item should be the bracha will be on, and the other food items will be dragged along with this first food item. So that was the question of which one should actually receive the bracha, and the others will drag along. Now, according to this new interpretation, that the argument of the Mishnah applies also in a case where there are 2 brachas being recited. Here also, you'll have this debate between the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda. Do you recite the bracha on what you cherish more, or do you recite the bracha on which one is from the 7 species? So the Gemara said that we have a source for this in the verse of the 7 species. And what does that mean? That means that if you read the 7 species, there's an order, of course. It has a certain order to the food items that Israel is blessed with. And it says first the chita usa'ira, and then it says all the others gefen se'ena v'rimai. And because it says first wheat and barley, and then it speaks about the fruits, we see that there's a certain order that you have to give even within the 7 species to the different brachas. And there's a certain order for the 7 species, there's a certain order for the 7 species, which ones come first, even within the 7 species. And if that's so therefore, the same thing would apply when you have 2 separate brachas. You would recite, how much more so, you would recite the 7 species first. Because even within the 7 species, there's importance to give honor to to 2 of the items before the other items, the chita and sa'ira. So how much more so should you give honor to the 7 species? How much more so should you give honor to the 7 species relative to something that's not from the 7 species. So what this means is that what is the bracha on chita and se'ira? So the simple understanding here is that chita and se'ira, we're talking about wheat and barley that are made into a cake or into bread. So what bracha does it have? It has the bracha of mezainos or maitzi, or hamaitzi, and that would come before the bracha on the pomegranate or on the grapes and so on. So we see here that there is an order to the 7, even within the 7 species. You have to be careful of what order you recite the brachas, and some of the 7 species come before the other 7 species. Therefore, the same thing would apply to, and how much more so it should apply to if you have food that aren't 7 species and you have food that is a 7 species. So you would have to recite the bracha on the 7 species food first before the bracha on the non-7 species. Now, that is the simple explanation here. However, there is an interpretation that chita and se'ira here, wheat and barley, don't only apply if you made a cake out of it or bread, but it could apply even if the wheat and barley, you're eating them as grain. You're eating the wheat kernels that are roasted or toasted, and you're reciting a ho'adama on it. And even then, the statement of Rav Yitzchok that whatever is mukdam, Rav Yosef and Rav Yitzchok, some say Rav Yosef, some say Rav Yitzchok, that whatever is mukdam in the verse, whatever is earlier in the verse, that is what you gets the bracha first. And even if the bracha would be ho'adama, the wheat and the barley come before the other fruits. Now, what this boils down to is, it comes out, what comes out from this is something that we spoke about a little while back, a few days ago. We spoke about, does ho'adama come after ha'etz? Do you have to recite a ha'etz before a ha'adama? Why would you say a ha'etz before a ha'adama? Why would you recite a bracha for a fruit tree, for fruits from a tree, before a vegetable? Well, because a vegetable bracha, when you recite ha'adama, things that grow from the ground, that's very generic. A lot of things grow from the ground. Even fruit trees grow from the ground. And fruits from the tree ultimately grow from the ground. But when you say a bracha on a fruit from a tree, it's a more specific bracha. This fruit grew from the tree. This is a more specific bracha. And we've already learned earlier that all the brachas come before shahakol, because shahakol is too generic, and the other brachas are more specific. We want to thank Hashem in a more specific way. It's more honorable. And you would recite other brachas before you would recite shahakol, because shahakol is generic. So the question is, would ha'adama be considered generic relative to ha'etz? Would the vegetable bracha be generic relative to a tree, to a fruit from a tree bracha? And that discussion seems to be based on this, or seems to be connected to this. If you learn that ha'etz has to come before ha'adama, if you learn that way, that because ha'etz is more specific, then you have to translate this Gemara to be that chita and se'ira come before, the wheat comes before a pomegranate. You'll have to say, why is wheat come before a pomegranate? Ha'adama is not supposed to come before a ha'etz. So you have to say, no, we're talking about the wheat was made into a cake. You made it into a cake. Then it comes before the ha'etz of the pomegranate or the olives, grapes. But if you didn't make it into a cake, then it's ha'adama. Then it wouldn't be. It doesn't have the uniqueness of the 7 species, that it would that it's what we're referring to. It's not really what it's referring to in the verse, and therefore you wouldn't need to recite that bracha. You wouldn't recite that bracha first, because it's not the flour, the wheat in its powerful state, in its honorable state, I should say, in its honorable state. However, if you learn that ha'etz does not have to come before ha'adama, then you can learn this, that it could be ha'adama here, and it's telling you that because it's wheat, the wheat kernels, you would recite the bracha on the wheat kernels before you would recite the bracha on the dates or the pomegranates or the olives and grapes. And the reason is because you're allowed to say ha'adama before ha'etz, and in this scenario, Israel is blessed with it, and it says it first in the verse. And so therefore, this could also not only be talking about cake, but it could be talking about just kernels of wheat that you're reciting the bracha on, which is ha'adama, vegetable. You're reciting the bracha, the vegetable bracha on it, and that could take precedence. It should take precedence, according to this opinion, over the pomegranates or grapes or dates or figs or olives, because it's earlier in the verse, and the verse includes that in the word chita, wheat. So again, there's 2 ways of learning this verse. Does the verse include wheat that are kernels, or is it only talking about wheat that it is made into a honorable food from wheat, like cake or bread? Okay, now that we've explained that, there is another question that should be mentioned, and that is Israel is blessed with these 7 species, but 2 of them are grain. And those 2 that are grain really include 3 others. Wheat includes spelt, and barley includes rye and oats. So do they also, so for example, let's say you have a spelt challah, and you have a barley challah. Would the spelt challah, if you're going to cut both, you're eating both, would you recite the bracha on the spelt challah and have in mind the barley challah, because wheat, a type of wheat, is spelt, and wheat comes before barley? Or do we say no, that it doesn't say clearly spelt in the Torah? In barley, it says clearly in the Torah, so barley maybe should come first before spelt. Spelt is only it's like included in the wheat, but it doesn't say it. So the conclusion, the Magen Avraham writes that spelt would come after the barley, because barley, it says clearly in the Torah, and that would be the proper order. Now,
Rabbi,
there is an opinion, I do want to just mention, there is an opinion of the Pnei Yeshua that does say that the other species, spelt, wheat, spelt, rye, and oats, are not necessarily included in the 7 species for all laws. Regarding the law of challah, they're included. The law of truma, they're included. The law of kilayim, they're included, but not for all other laws, and maybe they wouldn't apply to the laws of brachos. So that's an interesting point that the Pnei Yeshua says, that it maybe wouldn't apply these the fact that the spelt and the oats and rye are not written there in the pasuk. It means that it's not necessarily, it's not always included in the grains. But I think in Shulchan Aruch it is pretty clear. Pnei Yeshua was a commentary on the Gemara, but the Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avraham, is the accepted view in halacha. So it would seem that these other species are included even regarding the laws of brachos. Okay, now we have a few questions, and I don't know who's first. Let's start with Simone. Simone?
Yeah, hi. So this actually has a practical application for me. And that is every morning for breakfast, I have a bowl of bananas, grapes, apples, blueberries, almonds, and yogurt. Sometimes I add in muesli. Muesli has oats in it. So the question in a sense is this considered one meal, or is this considered each of these items individually requires its own bracha, in which case there is the question of the muesli before the grapes, which is kind of what we're talking about here. So I guess that's the question. Is this like one thing, or is this each individual item is going to require its own bracha, and muesli coming before grapes?
So I don't know what muesli is. What else is in it?
Muesli is the name of a kind of a Swiss breakfast cereal, and it's oats, it's rye, it has I think it has dates in it, it has some nuts in it, some other things too, which I don't have in front of me, but those kinds of things. Kind of a cereal.
Right. So
Special K with lots of stuff.
what did you say, Isaac? What?
Special K with lots of stuff, of other stuff.
Uh-huh. Special K, is that a Kellogg
A
cereal?
cereal, flaky cereal.
Yeah, I don't know. We only eat pas Yisrael stuff, so I don't know these type of things. But not to say that whoever eats it is anything wrong with it. There's definitely a lot of it's accepted to eat all cereals, no question, all kosher cereals. But I just don't know. I'm not familiar with all these cereals. But anyway, do they make flakes out of this? So it's the majority is oat flour. What's the majority? What's the first ingredient?
It's not flour, but I think it is like oat flakes, probably is the first ingredient. I could run and get it some point and take a look, but that's what I think.
So it's flakes. In other words, it's pressed oats. In other words, the oats are it looks like raw oatmeal that like
yeah,
granola.
It looks like raw oatmeal. Yes.
I see. And is it cooked or is it raw?
It's raw.
Oh, it is raw. They actually don't even toast it.
No, it's just raw oats.
And you mix it with
Yogurt and
milk
fruit.
Interesting.
Rabbi,
Are you inviting everyone, by the way? You're making everyone hungry. I see a lot of people getting hungry.
Rabbi, I just pulled it up on Wikipedia.
Together with your tea and this. I mean, this is really something. Where do you live, by the way? Okay, I'm just joking. So in any event, I have to think about it.
On Wikipedia, Rabbi, it says ingredients: grains, nuts, seeds, fresh or dried fruits, and it's prepared with milk or cream. But mainly, it's rolled oats.
Yeah.
That says the main ingredient is rolled oats.
Right.
On Wikipedia.
Right. The problem is that it seems like so what you're saying is it's very applicable to what we're learning, because here you're talking about oats that were not made into a cake, and you're eating them raw.
Exactly.
And would they receive some type of a
priority?
They receive some type of priority because they're because they are from the 7 species. Interesting. Now I'm going to have to think about that. It's a good question.
Let me know before tomorrow's breakfast.
Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about spelt. You said spelt is a kind of a wheat.
That's
but
what
it doesn't get priority in all cases, only in some, you said.
Well, it doesn't get priority.
So the question is, it doesn't follow the rule of being dragged along with other 7 meaning.
Well, this is the thing. It doesn't go before barley. That's the main point that we see. Doesn't come
before barley for sure, because barley is by itself is second. It's not
barley is second. So that the question is, what we're going to see is each thing we're going to see you follow what order it's in the verse.
Yeah.
And that would have priority.
But only in some cases.
And in this case, it doesn't say the word. So does it fall under the category of chita or not? And on this, Magen Avraham says it's not the same league. It's not in the same league, even though it's considered a type of wheat. It's not in the same league as chita, which it says explicitly. But it is considered a grain, and it would be hamaitzi if you made bread out of it, or mezainis if you made cooked cake out of it. But it wouldn't have that category of chita being first in the list. It wouldn't fall into the category of being first. Okay, so now the next question is, what about geffen, the grapes or wine? Does wine have precedence over the other species? And this is also a room for discussion. Wine, the bracha is bar pri hagafen, and some say that wine should come before the other species, because the bracha is a bracha that's very specific. The bracha on wine is a very specific bracha, and therefore the question would be, why? Why would the bracha bar pri hagafen come before all of these if it's really only what number? Chita sa'ira geffen. It's only third in the list. It's third in the list. So why would it come? Why would the bracha hagafen be before you would recite it before eating before eating any of the other, like for example, before eating olives, would you say bar pri hagafen before eating olives? So olives are considered a priority, that you would recite the bracha on olives first. But here we're saying that bar pri hagafen would come first, and the reason is because when it says the geffen, it's really referring to grapes that make wine. It's not referring to the wine itself, and therefore the verse that says geffen, it's referring to the grapes that make wine, and but the wine itself does have a different rule, falls into a different category, because wine is not the same as grapes. Now, the next thing is te'ena, figs, remine, pomegranates, and then it says zeis shemen, olive oil, which we've discussed, the olives, and we've discussed olive oil as well. But the question would be dvash. When it comes to honey, we're talking about honey from dates. What bracha do you recite on date honey? So we've learned before the bracha. Anyone remember what bracha is on date honey?
Is it shahakol?
Shahakol. That's right, Edith. The shahakol. And so the bracha on date honey is shahakol. So the verse, even though it says the word honey, it really means dates that you make honey out of, dates that produce honey. But really, the honey itself, we said, is shahakol. So they would not be included in the honey from dates would not be included in the 7 species. However, there is one opinion, we did mention this, that says that when it says shahakol on date honey, it's when you add water to it. But if you don't add water to it, then date honey would be, there is such an opinion, that date honey would actually be ha'etz. And I think the reason behind that opinion is because the verse says dvash, it says honey. And since it says the word honey, that would imply that honey itself should be The honey itself should be included in the 7 species and have be included in the fruits of the honorable fruits of the 7 species and receive that bracha of ha'etz. But that opinion, of course, is not the accepted view. And the accepted view is date honey is shahakol, and when it says udvash in the verse, it means dates itself. So the Gemara said that we see from this statement, we see that what Rabbi Yehuda says regarding giving precedence or honor to the 7 species, that really applies to certain brachas coming before other brachas. Doesn't only apply to one bracha, it applies to others. And you see that from here. Now, there really are 2 ways to learn this. There really are 2 ways to learn this. There is a question in the printing about one letter. There's one letter that's questionable in this Gemara. And the letter is a letter Daled. The letter Daled, where it says, the Amar Reb Yosef, the Itema Reb Yitzchok, that letter Daled, the Amar, is questionable. It could be, there are some that have a text without that letter Daled. And that would make a difference in the interpretation, that one letter. If you read the Daled, the Amar Reb Yosef, it's a continuation of the previous statement that Reb Yirmiyah said lahaktim. Reb Yirmiyah said, when you have different brachas, one comes before the other, that Reb Yehuda would say you give the bracha to the 7 species before the other brachas against the rabbis, because the rabbis would say you choose what you cherish more. And that would be continued over here. The Amar, because Rabbi Yosef says. The Amar, the Dalet is because or as. That letter Dalet means as Rabbi Yosef says, or since Rabbi Yosef says. And that would be a continuation that you see in the verse. It mentions the priority that whatever's earlier is muktam lebracha, comes first for a bracha. And he shows the verse and he emphasizes that point. Now, if you don't read with the letter Daled, then it's a statement on its own. And it's not only following Reb Yehuda. What it comes out is it's actually also it's also acceptable by the rabbis. A new statement. Reb Yirmiyah said you got to do whatever's first. According to Reb Yehuda, it means you go by the 7 species. The rabbis say you go by what you cherish. That's what you do first. Different food items, different brachas, whatever, you go by whatever's first. What lahaktim. You say the bracha on what's supposed to be first. According to Reb Yehuda, it's the 7 species. Now, the next Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yosef, a new thing. Rabbi Yosef says that there are 7 species, and you're supposed to follow this order. Whatever's earlier in the bracha, you're supposed to follow that. And what is Rabbi Yosef really saying? He's saying that, number one, there is importance to the 7 species. And there, even within the 7 species, certain ones are important. And you got to give precedence to the ones that are earlier in the verse. And what are the rabbis? How could the rabbis agree with this? The rabbis say you got to give precedence to the one you cherish. So, according to Rabbi Yosef, you recite the bracha first on the olive, let's say, and then afterwards on the date, right? Because first it says olives, zeis shemen udvash. First it says olives, and then it says dates. So Rabbi Yosef would say you got to first recite the bracha on the olive, and then it includes the date. What would the rabbis hold? The rabbis would seemingly hold you got to do what you'd like better. You like dates better, recite the bracha on the dates. That'll include the olive. So how could this fit with the rabbis? The answer is because the rabbis, what do they do in a case where you like both the same? If you like both the same, then you got to follow the 7 species. If both are the same and you cherish both, then neither of them are prioritized by the rabbi's view of cherishing. Then you got to follow this. This opinion fits with the rabbis as well. Not in all cases. In cases where you don't cherish one more than the other. In cases where you don't cherish one more than the other, this statement can fit with them, and that's why you don't have to. That's why the according to that girsa, that text doesn't have the word the dalet, because this fits according to everyone, even according to the rabbis in a certain scenario where both are cherished. Okay, so that really covers at least this part of the Gemara, and Metz Hashem, we'll continue tomorrow. Yes, Ben.
I see the Amar 3 times. After Amar Chad Amar Chad or Chad Amar, one when the brachot are Shavot and one when they are not Shavot, and then Rabbi Yossi.
Yeah,
So
I'm only talking about this
dalet. Maybe when they said Chad, they meant Rabbi Yossi.
No, that's not what the rabbi is talking about. It's about I don't know, 20 lines up from the bottom.
Yeah,
Says,
well, Amar or the Amar is not that different. They're pretty much the same. It's as he said or he said. So
no, he's trying to explain the Tosfot, which appears there that says Amar bi mi ala hagdim, etc. And he says there's a different girsa which says without the dalet in front of the word Amar, and he's trying to explain that.
but it's the same with the dalet or without the dalet.
No, it's not.
Why not?
If it has the dalet, it's a
Yeah.
continuation of what it just said earlier, and what it just said earlier was explaining Rabbi Yehuda.
Oh, so you're taking it to the past. As he
Because
said in the
Omar,
past.
you say because, you can't start a sentence because unless you said something before. I'm doing it this way
Not
because.
not because.
So this-
as
Right,
said,
or as. Okay, start a
yeah,
sentence.
but as said could be for the future too. As said Rabbi so-and-so.
It really means since. The Omar, since Rabbi, this so-and-so said. So since, you can't start a sentence since. You have to say, I'm doing something this way since this, right? Since is like a continuation of something that you're doing, or because is a continuation of something that you're doing, or as is also a continuation. You could start a sentence maybe, but you're
Yeah.
saying this is as that. This is as this rabbi said. So you have to, so it has to be a continuation of what it said before.
If it's in the
But if you
past, they
don't-
would say She'amar or
No, because no, it wants to say
She'amar
because.
means he said before.
Yep. Yeah, but we're not just saying something someone said. We're saying this is the reason. This is the source. This is the source behind it. Dear Omar,
Okay.
because we find
As he
good
said.
proof. Right. So this is going to be a proof something before. So it's on this dalid that there's a question if it's in if some had a text without the dalid, some have a text with the dalid.